Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. This episode is continuing our summer series about belonging outside belonging games. And I'm your MC, Rich.
And I'm Rach. Tonight we're joined by our guest, Jamie Najati of Sword Queen Games. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, hello.
Jamie, how did you get your start in belonging outside belonging games?
Ooh, my start. Yeah, so I spend a lot of time just going through the internet finding as many RPGs as I could. I don't even remember how I came across Dream Askew because it's not a game most people know about, and this was way back in its first prototype, so this was years ago. So I first came across it then, and I run games at local conventions, and I really wanted to run Dream Askew, and there was one convention that was focused on queer communities and women, and I felt like Dream Askew would be really great for it. So that was my first belonging outside belonging game.
Nice. That is really cool. Well, let's jump on over here and we'll spin the token.
Spend a token.
In Spin the Token, our guest talks about stuff that's happening at their table, and I specifically wanted to talk to Jamie about this particular one. So often we let the guests pick whatever they want, but not this time. I twisted their arm. Spoiler alert, friends. This talks a little bit about BALIKBAYAN. So normally in the belonging outside belonging games, they are diceless and GM-less, but in BALIKBAYAN, that's not entirely the case, right, Jamie? So talk a little bit about why you have a GM, a game master. Do you call them GM? What's the term?
Yeah. We still call them GM. I still like game moderator, only because I mostly kept the GM in for people like me, for veterans who were having a hard time shifting over. Because the first time I played Dream Askew, so I play tested it before the convention, and it was disastrous. It was so bad.
Oh no!
All four of us veterans. I'm trying to remember. I think there were 4 or 5 of us. It was so hard without a GM. We were all kind of lost. We kept just staring at each other. What do we do now? do I? Oh no! Am I going to cause problem? It was a disaster. It went on for 4. We still got a good story out of it, but I think one of the really interesting problems we made for ourselves was we left the Enclave. And if you look, I played the Torch, and if you look at the Torch, most of their moves are about being in the Enclave. So it was such a disaster. Yeah. And it was like that for most of us, because Dream Askew is about being in the Enclave, but we were just so used to, we quest, right? We go out and do stuff. Isn't that what characters do?
Oh my god, you tried to go questing with Dream Askew?
It was so bad. It was so bad. I almost cried. I was like, this is so... What happened? And
kind of... Oh.
And I really felt at the time, I was thinking, okay, well, it was just me not knowing how the system worked. So I personally don't feel that belonging outside belonging is GM less. I feel it's more GM full. Everyone is supposed to be the GM, which is what people talk about when they talk about the game. But I think for people like me and a lot of veterans, when you think GM less, it's really supposed to be there's no, rather than we are all the GM.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept playing Dream Askew, and I was having a really good time. But I noticed that it would fall upon one person to sort of carry throughout the session. It would be the one person who felt I'll set my character aside so that I can be the voice of the NPC, right? And I didn't like that so much. And basically I understood that for a lot of us, it's easier if the social contract is just in place. There is one person who is the GM. There's one person who plays the NPCs, who answers some questions or, asks questions of the players. So I don't think GMless is bad, but I do think that the idle dreaming that is built into the system of belonging outside belonging doesn't really work for everybody. It's not natural for a lot of people. Even people who got used to it like in our long series of Dream Askew, we would actually go back and forth. Some sessions we'd have a GM, other sessions we wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we'd be like, okay, for this session, I just want to chill and be our characters. And then for another session, no, I really want to address what's going on with the gangs outside there. So let's have a GM for this session who's going to act like the gang. So
I want to move plot. We need a GM.
Which is basically it, right? Because without a GM, it's hard to move plot, right? Like, there needs to be so much more of a meta conversation. And I'm just the kind of player where I like plot, I like structure, I like a focus. So when I was making BALIKBAYAN, I kept going back and forth. I was like, do I remove the GM completely? Do I was like, do I permanently say the GM has to be part of the system? So what I did instead was I made it an option, and I tried to make it as clear as possible in the description what the pros and cons are, and really to state that you can go back and forth. It's not a solid thing. But I also built it into the structure of which we'll talk about a bit later, I'm sure, the Reckoning and the Homecoming. Like, a lot of the GM work is there also as a structure. So even if you don't have a GM, you at least have that aspect to help plot, help movement, help structure.
Jamie, do you find that having the option to have a GM or not have a GM provides other support in making the game more inclusive?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I was talking about having a GM or not having a GM on Twitter, I mean, I know Twitter is a hell site, but it's really helped me become a better designer with all the conversations. So Riley Rethel and a few other designers were talking about how much they appreciated not having a GM. It made it easier for them as neurodivergent people to not have one authority figure. And it's something that I realized I couldn't remove from the game, because then I would be removing something so unique that was more inclusive, that was more supportive of neurodivergent folks. Like, just because I'm neurotypical doesn't mean that I shouldn't acknowledge that that can be better for a lot of people. So yeah, and a lot of people I talk to who are neurodivergent, they've been running BALIKBAYAN for like 4 months, 6 months. They've been playing every week, and they really enjoy not having a GM in their games.
It's fascinating that you have a design that you can move in and out of having a GM. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think I also want to encourage people to, like, you can make BALIKBAYAN your own. You can just shift things back and forth as you like. And I want to teach people that they can hack the games into whatever shape they like, because there are a few people, I definitely came from that when I first got into RPGs, this idea that you cannot move the game, you cannot shift and tweak and change things or hack things, and I wanted to build it into the game for sure.
Yeah, that's really neat and interesting to just tell the readers of the game outright, no, you can play with this. If you don't like this part, take it out.
Yeah.
As opposed to, my word is God, play the game as I fully intended.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what a lot of older games felt like for me. And I remember every time I would, for example, if I'd run D&D and I would try to tweak or shift or change things, I would get so much pushback from the players who were like, you're not doing it right. So I just wanted to build into a system where there is no right way of doing it.
That's fascinating that people would feel that way about D&D when there's like so many different flavors of D&D. But I hear you. I've had those conversations. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, heck, there's not even one D&D. There are 5. Or more.
Yeah, and you'll fight over which one's the right one.
Oh my.
So even though I say that the game can have a GM, I try as much as possible to encourage in the writing of the game and how the playbooks work that the GM does not work like a traditional GM. The GM is encouraged to let the players create the world with them, which is something I love about not just Belonging and Outside Belonging, but story games in general nowadays. Like, for example, in every playbook I try to put something about co-create with your GM something. So, for example, in the Aswang playbook, co-create with your GM the rules of Aswang. Like, what are the rules for this culture, for this group? What does it mean? And for the Saints, they have something called co-create with your GM the rules of divinity. What does it mean to be a god or a small god? So I try as much as possible. The GM is just there to facilitate, but not to have all of the narrative power. And I think sometimes you need a GM in place to help people learn that, because if you're coming from the experience of the GM has all of that power, it can be difficult to, I feel like it's being thrown off into the deep end, right? So at least if there's a facilitator, there's a GM, there's like a bit of a halfway point to get you used to it. So that's definitely part of the thinking for sure.
What would you say is the biggest challenge as someone who might have experience as a traditional GM to shift into becoming a belonging outside belonging GM?
I would say get used to not bringing in a lot of lore, because I've had this question in playtests and with other people running. You cannot plan for anything. I feel like this is true for any game, really, for me personally. But I know there are people who like to have their structure, like first they'll go into the facility and then they'll talk to these NPCs. But I think for belonging outside belonging, it's much better if you just let the players guide the narrative and then you respond to it. And then you really key into and pay attention to the choices made. Because it's all like pick lists and stuff in belonging outside belonging, but each choice speaks volumes. Each choice is the player telling everyone else at the table, this is what I want to engage with. I want to engage with the idea that someone I killed is now an android, and I want them to show up in the game. So I feel like as a GM switching over, don't bring in your story, just be the space, be the creative space for other people to tell their stories. And that's a lot of fun too. Like, I personally enjoy that more. I know it's not everybody's fun, but for a lot of people who've switched over, they've told me it's been really interesting, really expansive. So even when they go back to a more quotation mark traditional game, they like bring a little bit of that with them.
My experience with belonging outside belonging is very small. I'm a little baby gamer in this space. I found in my experience that getting to a conflict in a scene was challenging without a GM to drive that.
For sure.
Have you found in BALIKBAYAN that with a GM, does it facilitate and make conflicts easier to engage with? Or was that just me?
Yeah, do you mean conflicts with like NPCs or PCs or just in general? Yeah, just
like
in general.
Fights and arguments and, stuff where dice might hit the table, but they don't hear because there are no dice. But
Yeah, conflict. Yeah. I get it. I hear you. I felt the same way. And actually, it really helped when I was playtesting another belonging outside belonging game on the Gauntlet. Daryl, one of the players, he pointed out something that blew my mind. He was like, the thing with Dream Askew is that it's a slice of life game. It's meant to be a more chill game, a more exploratory game. And then the rest of us at the table are like, oh, that makes sense. But we want to hit things. or we want conflict of some kind, right? It doesn't have to be like physical hitting. So in BALIKBAYAN, it's in the design. So I did that on purpose. Like for the questions you ask of each other, I tried to make them as evocative as possible. Like I tried to build in some points of conflict. I also have, when you choose a hope, it's very, very easy for what you as a character hope for will go up against what another character hopes for. And that's where there's a lot of conflict. And there's also, the game also asks you, what does it mean to rebirth magic? What does it mean to run away from the corp? People will always have different ideas of what that's like. And it will perpetually push up and introduce these key points of conflict. And so I definitely feel you, and I like putting conflict in my games only because like I feel like it's for me, I think it's a great way to look into what makes a character tick and what brings a setting to life. So I know like some people just want to play to have a chill time, and that's totally valid, right? I just like conflict.
Setting the stakes is always a good time, but now that you've pointed out that Dream Askew is very much a slice of life game, it makes it a lot easier for me to pitch it to people because I think that crystallizes it so well.
Right? Like when Daryl said it, we were all like, whoa.
Right? When you said it, I was like, oh my gosh, my mind just expanded.
Yeah, because like what other people say, they say things like, oh, there's no narrative floor or there's no point. But I really think it's really just meant to be slice of life, and you explore and you enjoy and you slowly figure things out. And with BALIKBAYAN, I wanted people to hit the ground running. Like, you're running from the corp. Magic is dying. You're back in the city. What do you do? Right?
It definitely sounds like it's time to move on to our next segment. You also play as where our guest will talk about a specific belonging outside belonging game. You also play as and Jamie, introduce to us the game of tonight.
The game of tonight is Balikbayan, Returning Home. Balikbayan it's a word that's familiar to most Filipinos. It literally means one who has returned home. And so I just put Balikbayan, Returning Home in the same thing just so that it's more inclusive. But what is Balikbayan about? Balikbayan is a supernatural cyberpunk TTRPG with a focus on Filipino folklore and myths. It's really inspired by Shadowrun, because I love Shadowrun, but I do not love the system. It has been a point of contention. And so when I saw Belonging Outside Belonging, and I saw how seamless it was, I was like, what if I put my Shadowrun dreams into this thing? I also wanted to meld the magic and technology better, because Shadowrun is known for elves, orcs, but, also tech. But I actually find there's too much of a divide. Like, if you build a character who's technology focused, it's hard for them to shift towards any magic, right? Because there's this weird inbuilt thing about the more tech you have in your body, the less you can resonate with magic. I'm one of those people that believes droids in Star Wars should be able to attune to the Force if they want to. So this was also my answer to that. I wanted to create a game where the line between magic and technology is absolutely blurred. So it's up to us when we play the game. What does that line mean? Does that line exist? How does it shift back and forth? So in Balikbayan, you are playing as elementals. You are beings of myth and magic who were once immortal. You have escaped the corporation that was using you, and you are returning to the city that was once your home. So Balikbayan as a game asks you, can you bring about the rebirth of magic before the corp recaptures you? There's that perpetual tension. There is this sense of two clocks going up against each other. And Balikbayan is also inspired by Filipino folklore and aspects of Filipino culture. It's all built into the system, but the story asks you to make it your own. I've taken great liberties in deconstructing and reinterpreting these beings of myths and magic, and they're just meant to be a starting point. So, for example, the tikbalang is really famous for being an anthropomorphic horse here in the Philippines, but it has some problematic, colonial interpretations. For example, the horse is not natural to the Philippines. We don't naturally have horses here. So why is the tikbalang an anthropomorphic horse? And the answer is, it wasn't always. It used to be more like a crocodile, but when the Spanish came, they took that and they changed it. And they changed it into a horse-based thing because they wanted Filipinos to be afraid of the Spanish and their horses, right? So it's all these horror stories are built in to control people, right? So and that's true for a lot of our myths and legends. And I wanted to address that. So instead, I said no. The tikbalang can become any anthropomorphic animal. I wanted it to reconnect to the animism of the Philippines, how we used to be really connected to our animals and the land. And I wanted that to be reflected in that playbook and in all of the other ones. I was so sad with how a lot of people who were around, like college students, who didn't know a lot of the myths and legends. They didn't know what a San Telmo was. They knew the basics of a tikbalang, but they didn't know some of the other things. So I wanted to use that as a focus and really bring that back. And I think another example is the Saint is a reflection and subversion of how our colonizers erased and rewrote our original belief system. So before the Spanish came, before we were colonized, there used to be this idea of Bathala, and that was completely rewritten into a more Catholic idea of this one God. And so I called it the Saints because we have a lot of saints. They're very important to us locally. But instead, this saint is one who talks to little gods, gods who no longer have power, gods who are just trying to survive in the city. Sort of like how our gods have no longer really survived from the colonization process. But the thing is, to enjoy playing the saint, you don't need to know any of those things. It's just built into the playbooks. It's something to explore narratively. It's just there to be enjoyed. And I wanted people to just be able to pick it up and play it and enjoy using it as a starting point without having to think about, what does it mean to be Filipino? Or do I have to be Filipino to play this game? I didn't want those questions to come up at all. I want everyone to enjoy those games.
So what mechanics are different in Balikbayan versus, say, Dream Askew?
It's both a lot and not a lot at the same time. The mechanics that are different in each playbook, I put in what you hope for. And this was really important to me. Each character has something they hope for, and they have a strong move that simply states, make what you hope for more real. And so it's a way to give each character their own drive. So there's less that idle dreaming, there's less that slice of life, because aside from escaping the corp, aside from bringing about the rebirth of magic, you also have your very personal idea of what you hope for as a character. And it's a question of, does this align with the goals of the group? Or does it endanger the goals in some way? Is it somewhere in between? And it provides more guidance in play. So that's the first different mechanic. And then the second one, this one's pretty big, is elemental magic. So I got this idea from Before the Spire Falls, which is another great Belonging Outside Belonging game. And they introduced the idea of each playbook has access to magic. But it was very straightforward. But I was so inspired by it. I was like, what if we put in a little extra PBTA, a little, just a sprinkle into each playbook. So that's what elemental magic is. Each elemental has access to two forms, what machine magic they are capable of. So, for example, the Centelmo can hack into spirits and gain information that way, and the Aswang can gift another Black Wings and turn someone else into another Aswang. And so I wanted to give each playbook an idea of, this is the magic you are capable of, this is what the Corp was using you for, or they tried to stop you from being able to use. That's a lot of fun. And then another really essential mechanic is a whole new sheet. And one side is called Reckoning and the other one is called Homecoming. So the Reckoning is the first of two narrative gauges. Under Reckoning, you start on the run. And as the corp gets closer, a box can be marked and you move towards captured. So this is every time you tick that box, the whole game shifts because everyone understands the corp is getting closer and closer to us. And you can also shift it back. You can remove a mark also. Okay, we've managed to get them off our backs for now. So each time a box is marked, the group must make a choice. So one of us pays a terrible price. One of us is reshackled, meaning they're enslaved again by the corp. Or one of us weakens. We lose access to one form of our elemental magic. And I like how that plays out in the game because everyone has this interesting meta conversation for a moment. It pulls them out for a second in a good way to remind them that, we're able to look at the story from a meta perspective. And they'll say things like, you know what, it makes sense for my character to lose access to their magic because I pushed myself too hard in this last scene. And so now I can no longer do this or something similar. So that's really cool. But if all 5 boxes are marked, the elementals are officially captured and it will trigger the epilogue questions. Because I love epilogue questions. When I first played Bluebeard's Bride, I was blown away by I love how everything wraps up in these epilogue questions. So I did the same for BALIKBAYAN. So, for example, I'm just going to look at one of the questions for Reckoning. One of the epilogue questions is, what terrible price does the city pay when you are recaptured? And, I do have another one I like, which is, which one of you was secretly a traitor all along? Though I do put in the book, if you don't want to have a traitor, just drop it. But so far in games, people are like, yes, it was me. And it's fun because the player didn't know they were playing a traitor until they got to that moment. They were like, oh yeah, now it makes sense. I thought this character was all in, but no, they were secretly a traitor and I didn't know until this point. So that's fun. And then so on the other side, there's Homecoming. Similar to Reckoning, but you start at fading because the idea is your magic is faded. The corp has leached so much of your magic out of you, has used you so much. And even the magic in the city is fading. So you're trying to work towards the rebirth. So you're trying to mark towards reborn. Each time a diamond is marked, the group chooses. You can choose one of us is revitalized, which often can mean they gain back the magic that they lost in some way, maybe from a reckoning move. You can also choose to free and enslave because I wanted to build into the system the idea of you got away, but not everyone else did. So what do you do for those who are left behind? And there's also one of us strengthens, which means I wanted that PBTA idea of oh yeah, you can just pick and choose someone else's magic. So you're in a swamp, but maybe now you can use the satellites that can smite the wicked from the Saint playbook, right? That'll be fun. So I wanted to give people the option for that. And so when all 5 diamonds are marked, the elementals have brought about a true rebirth of magic and they trigger the epilogue questions. as well. So, for example, one of the questions are, how are our hopes realized? Another one, this one people sometimes don't want to answer, is which one of us runs away and helps rebuild the corp? Because I wanted to build that. And even though you won, maybe there's one of you that thought this was wrong and maybe the corp should return. And that's how I understand colonialism in a way. But anyway, so it's just built into the system. And the last thing that's different is I still have setting elements in Balikbayan. They're fairly straightforward, except that there are questions that are built into it. So this helps the players create more lore, because I really wanted to encourage people to just go ahead and be brave about creating that lore. And there's also a bit more of aspects of Filipino culture, the effects of colonialism on its people and its culture. It also strongly reminds players that we can always play to find out, because the questions are like pretty intense and we don't have to answer them on the spot. So for example, one of the questions under the setting elements of our magic is, how has magic changed and evolved technology? Who benefits from this? So that can be a pretty big question. We don't have to answer it on the spot, but it's something for people to keep in mind as we play. But yeah, so those are the slightly tweaked or completely new mechanics I put into Balikbayan.
What's your favorite move or mechanic and why?
It has to be the elemental magic. I love seeing how the players interpret how the magic works, what it looks like. Depending on the group or the player, it can be more magical. For another group, it can be more technology focused. It's really a lot of fun. I really enjoy that aspect. But one of the things that I always put in for the elemental magic in most of the moves, I wrote the words, for as long as the protocols remain stable and your heart is strong. And I put that in on purpose because I wanted the players to answer, what does it mean when your heart is strong, and what will weaken your heart? And why does it affect your magic? Why does it affect your abilities? And that's always been interesting. So like in play, it can be like, they're so strong, but then something emotional happens that causes them to flinch or causes them to lose the ability, and then the magic just sort of flickers out. And it always creates these really dramatic moments that I enjoy.
Well, I have to say, I'm pretty stoked about maybe getting an opportunity to give this a shot. What do you think, Jamie, about jumping over here to No Dice, No Masters and actually playing a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
No dice, no masters.
In No Dice, No Masters, the guest hosts some aspect of their game for an actual play demonstration. Jamie has had both Rach and I choose a different... Are they called playbooks? Jamie, what are they?
Yeah, they're still called playbooks, yeah.
Oh, nice. So we chose different playbooks, and we did a little bit of prep before we started recording, just talking through a bit of the characters. I chose an Aswang. And Rach?
I went with Sant Elmo.
Yeah, very cool. I think before we get into it, so that people listening can have an idea of what the Swang is and what the Sant Elmo is, could I ask each of you to read out the short description that's under generations ago?
Generations ago, humans feared the dark and what stalked them. You carry the remnants of that fear, humanity's desire to be consumed. As an Aswang, you can access these memories and use blood and despair as your weapon.
Oh, that was so good. And how about our Sant Elmo?
Generations ago, humans despaired over death. You carry the remnants of that despair and humanity's desire to reconnect to those lost to death. As a Sant Elmo, you can connect these memories and access almost any information, even the ghosts of the wisdom left behind.
Awesome. Okay, so basically, we have our dangerous Aswang, who's very good at being scary and putting the hurt, but can also turn other people into Aswang. And our Sant Elmo, who is, I basically wanted to put in a hacker, but I wanted to make it magical, so it's a hacker that can hack ghosts. Like, it's that straightforward. Okay.
Nice.
Magic hacking!
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best. Basically, for this, I'm going to hard frame us a little bit so that we can just jump into the action. And so I'm just going to explain to people listening, we chose some things from our pick list. I asked questions before the recording started, so I'd have a good idea of what we could hard frame into, which is what a GM is meant to do, like to look at what choices the playbooks made, or even if in a GM-less game, like what choices we made, and it'll guide play, right? We are in the city, I'm going to say it's Metro Manila. The year is 3055, right? It's way into the future. You can see from where you are the satellites that have been abandoned in the air, and they glow like stars that are too close to the city. There's a neon rain that covers everything. And you are currently in your hideout. So Dixon, our San Telmo, I want to ask you, you know that there is a particular executive of the Corp that has been especially hounding the two of you. You can see, like, every time you open up your holocast, every time you look outside, your faces are just plastered over everything. But if you can get to this executive and change their mind, it's up to you how that will happen. Maybe you could buy yourselves a little reprieve. You could get them off your back. But you also know that there's a particular spirit that crossed this executive that has information about how to get to them. So I want to ask you, Dixon, who is the spirit? What did the executive do to them, or was it something unrelated?
I think the spirit is the executive's child that they, an adult child that they had an estranged relationship with and died without it being resolved.
Oh, I like that. That's really cool. How did the spirit reach out to you? Or did you reach out to them?
So I think there was one day where I and Kidlat were trying to hide in a dark alleyway, and we saw, here's these pixel boards with our images on them yet again. We were having a conversation about this executive and how frustrating this has made our progress so far. And it's that point I felt a tingle in the back of my mind from the spirit as it reached out to connect with us. But it was very faint, and I'm not sure if it's shy or scared or exactly what, but it doesn't like lingering for long.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so let's say you're at your hideout and you feel that tingle again at the back of your neck, and you hear a voice that says, I don't have much time, please. If there's someone who can help me reach to my mother, change her mind, please. And you can just feel them just on the edge of things. What do you do?
Dixon is so concerned that any movement, any pushing back is going to startle the spirit and make them run away. So she is going to allow a lost spirit to take over her body. Just sort of make a vacuum to suck it and pull it in so it stays in one place long enough. Maybe Kidlat's going to be able to talk to them. I'm going to have faith that Kidlat's going to be able to do a social thing. We're going to see how that's going to go down.
I love it. I love it. So what does it look like when this spirit gets into your body? Like, how does your magic manifest? How does the technology shift and move?
So I have this long, multicolored flowing hair, and I think it goes, instead of being multicolored, fades into one solid color, and there's some twitching. Like, if you're in bed with someone and they're falling asleep, there's those little spasms right before they go to sleep, like those slight spasms. Like, there's definitely something going on here.
Ooh.
And then my eyes close, and when they open up again, it's the spirit that's taken hold.
That's very cool. What you see, so our Swang, Kidlat, you can see that it's like this holographic image fades in and out for a moment before it completely takes over Dixon's body. So usually when we get to this point, I always ask, Rach, do you prefer if I play out the spirit that's in your body, or do you want to play out the spirit that's in your body?
I want to know the secrets of the spirit that's taking over my body, so you should go ahead.
Okay, sure. But feel free to jump in anytime. You can see, like, their face starts to shift to look more like the person, and they look at you, Kidlat, and they say, my mother talked about you a lot, and she reaches out to touch your face. What do you do?
Kidlat shies away from the touch, turning his chin just slightly, but he doesn't move completely away, so that the spirit's hand ends up brushing across the top of his forehead, and be almost like someone might pet a dog. He moves his head just a little bit. I am sure that your mother
had nothing good to say.
Well, she did say that you, out of all the Aswang, were the most dangerous. Tell me, Kidlat, if you help me, can you kill her?
Of course I can kill her. The question is, should I? Your own mother? Why?
And she sighs. It's lonely here in Sulad. It's lonely here on the other side. But it's peaceful. My mother has never known peace. I don't think she will ever know peace in life. But in death, maybe. Isn't that what you gift people, Kidlat? Peace in death?
Is it? I thought that I was always taking.
Well, I would like to think that we need the fear that you provide. I would like to think the corp has been unafraid for too long, and that they should know fear.
If you are lonely, and I can bring you peace, will you also help us? Your mother is hounding us. He pauses at the phrase. Will you convince her to stop? And then I will bring her to you.
Yes, I can do that. I just need you to destroy something for me. And you can see the face starts to flicker again. And she holds out her hands, and a memory starts to play out from a long time ago. You can tell that it was her and her mother, perhaps before the corporation, before her mother was an executive. And it's just a brief moment. They're just together in the kitchen, creating something together. It's a mishmash of a memory. You can't even see it too clearly. And she says, I need you to hurt me enough that the memories will lose shape. It'll be easier for me to do what I need to do. And you realize she's asking you to rewrite her memories, but through violence, rather than the way that you have been seeking out, Kidlat.
Are you sure that you can remain who you are?
And she pauses for a moment. I think so. I think I am who I am without my memories. Don't you feel that's the way of things?
I hope not. I'll do as you ask.
So what I want to ask you, do you think you are destroying something important, or do you think you're giving into the fading and feeling mortal in this moment?
He's agreeing to destroy something important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I'm specifically heading towards that.
Sure. Okay, so go ahead and take a token for it. What does it look like? Like, how will your violence destroy this memory?
We see Kidlat, who in his mortal form has tangled hair and wears hollow glasses that hide a glare, and the spirit in his true form comes forth, and he becomes this large dog-like machine that walks into the kitchen, and he savagely attacks the daughter right in front of her mother, stealing away and destroying in violence this vaguely happy memory between the two of them.
Do you go too far and give into your bloodlust, or do you hold back?
It's been too long. He's denied it for weeks now, and the bloodlust is too strong. He doesn't control himself.
And I think we just see just really quick images of this violence, but go ahead and take a token for giving into your bloodlust. And so, Dixon, you can see that it's going as well as can be expected.
I'm not surprised. I really wanted Kidlat to make a more discreet choice there. And I think Dixon's viewing this sort of like, kind of like having an out-of-body experience, sort of. That's how it feels like. And I
like
think
it.
that in the violence that Kidlat performs to this memory and this experience, Dixon's going to notice something about the memory that sort of sticks out that might be a hint of how to go forward and deal with this corporate executive.
Ooh, I like that idea.
I'm looking at find the fragment of a secret. Like, what is here that should not be here or doesn't make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I like it. So as the violence starts to overrun and the memory starts fading away, you can see that on the wall, like where the blood splatters, like we just focus on the blood on the picture frame, you can see that there is a family. You can see who will become the executive, the mother and her daughter. There's a moment where the glint of the light covers the face of who is the father, and you realize it looks a lot like Kitlat in his human form.
Mind just blown.
What does that fragment mean to you? What do you think it means?
I think it means that, one, Kidlat has memories that he doesn't even remember, and the true depths of depravity that this executive could be capable of are beyond Dixon's comprehension. I mean, she knew the Corp were terrible people, but the idea that they would churn on a loved one before she was taking the position of wanting to kill this executive, surely there's going to be a better way. On the other hand, now, maybe it's our responsibility to dispense karma.
Yeah, exactly. So to round off the scene, what do you feel like about letting the dead speak using your elemental magic, Dixon?
Yeah, I think now is a great time to use my elemental magic and let the dead speak.
Okay, so what does it look like? And are you going to use it? Do you have enough tokens to make it a strong move? To use your magic with haunting accuracy, or do you want to use your magic with consequence as a neutral move?
I want to use my magic with haunting accuracy.
Nice.
I think how this happens is the spirit that has taken over Dixon's body is trying to float back out again. In this transition moment, Dixon comes and grabs the spirit by the metaphorical arm.
Ooh.
And looks at the spirit in the eyes and gestures to Kidlat and says, "Is it true? Is this your father?"
And then she looks at you, and I think this is when you start to see, there's a slow split as her spirit tries to come to grips. You realize she doesn't remember this being the case. But I'm going to ask you to choose one option from Let the Dead Speak. Because I think you technically told me what answers you seek, but what do you choose about the information?
Oh, the information is complete, but it reveals a dark secret.
Oh yeah, let's go. I love it when people choose that one. And as she starts to split open, you can hear her starting to talk in a voice that's much too young. And you hear her saying, "Mom, I woke up and it's dark. What are you doing to Dad? No, don't hurt him. Please, just..." And then there's just a scream. And then you can hear Kitlat's voice coming through and saying, "It's okay. Your mother and I agreed. This is what it needs to be. We're doing this to protect you." And then the memory fades. So that was our little peek into Balikbayan returning home. I hope you guys had a good time. It was just a little short scene.
Wow, except for the talking part, I'm kind of speechless. That was good.
That was incredible.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for taking part in this Belonging Outside Belonging summer series and showing off Balikbayan returning home.
Jamie, if our listeners want to follow more of your work online or see what you're up to in terms of design, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. So Balikbayan is still in beta, technically. And as I explore Belonging Outside Belonging, I've been making a lot of Belonging Outside Belonging games. So I have one that's Vertigo 90s inspired called Oathbreakers. I have another one coming out that's sci-fi horror called Through a Mirror Darkly. But I make a lot of games. It's almost a problem, kinda. You can find me at temporalhiccup.itch.io. And you can also follow me on Twitter at temporalhiccup.
Great. Thanks, Jamie, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was super fun.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hello listeners, I wanted to let you know about Codex Hearthfire, the newest issue of the Gauntlet's tabletop role-playing game magazine, now available on Patreon. Hearthfire includes Packet, a game about the transatlantic journey from Liverpool to New York in the 1800s. Can you navigate the troubled waters between hope and home? Respite, a game of comfort and companionship through adversity, explored via stories told around a communal fireplace between battles. The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soulless, a new mystery for Brindlewood Bay. Trophy Gold Hearthfire, a major expansion for Trophy Gold that adds new storytelling options to downtime and upkeep. 36 precarious places to make camp, 9 original illustrations, and a beautiful custom layout. You can get Codex Hearthfire in the Gauntlet Patreon feed by making a $6 pledge in July. Your pledge helps support all the great work we do in the Gauntlet, including our Gauntlet Open Gaming Weekends and this very podcast. Thanks.